Can you homebrew DC20? That was at least one of my first questions while looking at the new D20 system that everyone is talking about. While the answer was obviously yes, how easy would it be? And how would we go about it? For those of you who don't know, DC20 is currently a new evolution of TTRPGs that take the best parts of Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder while sprinkling in its own unique, groundbreaking mechanics. By the time this video goes live, the crowdfunding is probably close to $1.5 million, which is absolutely incredible by TTRPG standards. The Dungeon Coach is a friend of the channel, but an incredible game designer in their own right, and deserving of the hype that this system is getting, recognized as the 6th edition we should have gotten. So at any time you can find the Kickstarter in the link below if you want to be part of the movement. But what better thing to do than homebrew the homebrew king himself? So that is what we're going to do today. So I took a relook at the current 0.7 alpha version, which is available for everyone to view on the Kickstarter page, which future alpha versions to come. And I again read over some of the unique features of the system, including a 4-point action system where players can use them at any point during a round, not only on their turn. And additionally, spellcasters get mana points instead of spell slots, with spells that grow according to the power that you put in it. So the Daylight spell is just a powered up light cantrip, for example. Martial characters get stamina points to refuel their maneuvers, putting them on par with spellcasting utility. And it also includes new skill challenges, social and exploration mechanics, and keeps the classes based off 4 main attributes of might, agility, intelligence, and charisma. And true to thinking outside the box, you can make any character based on any attribute. Make an intelligence fighter like Sherlock Holmes, or make a might-based wizard for classic muscle mage. But now what I've really wanted to do is homebrew a subclass, and if you've been around the channel for a bit, I love the flavor subclasses bring, and I've made quite a few free products in that regard, available for all of you guys that you can check out. But alas, the Kickstarter is not to that point yet in development, but it is coming. You get subclasses at level 3, and playtests only go up to level 2. So currently they don't exist, but they are in development. But then I realized that in order to play a character class, you have to be able to play a character race. So I jumped into the Ancestry System right away, and sure enough, we have a good foundation that we can jump off from. So as we read how the Ancestry System works, we find out that you get 5 Ancestry points to spend when you pick it. Depending on the strength of any given feature, it could cost 1 Ancestry point, or 2 points, or 3, and so on. This gives you customizability when making your perfect character, whether you're a half-breed between 2 races, or picking from a variety to give extra flavor to a character concept. Let's look at the elf and dwarf ancestries, for example. Every ancestry has 3 base ancestry traits that include your size being medium, movement of 5 spaces, and being a humanoid. Standard so that we don't have to homebrew that bit. But then you are given the default traits for DMs who want to speed up character creation and just provide a quick package of abilities. You may notice it has a feature worth 0 points, and you can only ever have one of these 0-point abilities at a time, but are mostly roleplay or flavor focused. And then you have expanded traits, which you can replace similar cost features for. So you don't like the Agile Explorer feature? No matter. Being 2 points, you can replace it with the Speed Increase feature, or both a Climb Speed and Peerless Sight. But let's say your mother was an elf, and your father was a dwarf. So maybe you trade the Agile Explorer feature for being more physically sturdy. But another thing you might notice is the negative point traits. These are detriments that you can put on yourself to give you another point to spend somewhere else. So take both the Might attribute decrease and the Frail traits, and then you just buy the Stubborn trait without having to get rid of any of your elf traits. And as far as I read, there is no limit to how many negative traits you can put on yourself, at least in this iteration of the rules, but of course that might be updated later. But now we know that if we make our homebrew race, we need default traits that equal 5, with at least 1 0-point feature. If we look at the halfling and gnome traits, this could even include a negative trait in the default if we want. And then we want to have expanded traits as further options for character creation. But now begs the question, what kind of race do we want to create? Besides what we've mentioned, we also have Orc, Dragonborn, Giantborn, Angelborn, Fiendborn, and Beastborn, which is actually an ancestry that does not have any default traits, opening it up to even unique homebrew if we want. A pretty fantastic loadout, but obviously missing some things like changelings, fairies, goblins, genasi or elemental-born, a robotic race, or a rare plasmoid. Not to say that those won't come to DC20 eventually, as the Dungeon Coach has talked recently in his live streams about magazine-style updates and additions to character creation. And I wish I had some time to go through and homebrew each one, but for now, one race will do. And one type of creature stands out specifically for me as something that would be probably far down the pipeline to make: the Plasmoid, or in this case, the OOZE-BORN. So to start homebrewing, I think for me it helps to lay down what kind of abilities we want to see, and then if there are any duplicates across the other DC20 Ancestries that are similar enough to kind of copy-paste, or at least take inspiration from. So doing that, we look at the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition version of the race, and we want things like amorphous, poison resistance, and holding breath. And then looking at some other familiar ooze-like monsters, we can find fun things like heat sense from the gelatinous cube, pseudopod attacks, and weapon corrosion. So as I started homebrewing and putting this together, the resistance part was easy, as I basically took a similar radiance resistance feature from the Angelborn, but realized that corrosive damage may be way more on brand than poison damage, so I put that in. And then I actually found an amorphous or a malleable feature in the Find Familiar spell, where you get to create your own familiar, so I added that. And then I took inspiration for acidic nature, heat sense, and pseudopods from the Beastborn's Build-A-Bear features of hazardous hide, echolocation, and natural weapons respectively, being able to deal corrosive damage to someone grappling you, seeing invisible creatures that give off heat, and giving you natural pseudopod weapons. All pretty on par for pseudopodic or plasmoid-like creatures. I then took the escape artist from the gnome that I really liked and then kind of flipped it for the sticky feature, being good to grapple but also getting out of being grappled being so fluid. But each thing I took, I changed just a bit to flavor more towards an ooze-like ancestry, of course. And then other things I took from other races was the climb speed from the Beastborn, toxic fortitude from the dwarf, and thick skin from the Dragonborn, but renamed it flexible because that made the fantasy more clear in my mind. One thing I really like about this way of doing ancestries is that you can really have way more features all piled into one race to really flesh out all the corners of the flavor. Instead of in like 5th edition homebrew, where everyone has their own iteration of what a dwarf or a genasi should look like, so you have a bunch of different ones all over the internet. Even me personally took a look at the genasi race, who are supposed to be an offspring of magical wish-granting genies, but then have nothing mechanical to allude to it. So in my opinion, genasi should be able to make subtle or small wishes. And if they also just come from other planar accidents in general, what about the rest of the planes instead of just fire, earth, water, and air? So I am working on an entire overhaul of genasi, one for every plane of existence, and tweaking of genasi and genie lore that make it true to the original lore while giving it a unique space in fantasy stories. So subscribe and stay tuned for that. But anyways, back to DC20. As I was saying, you can pick and choose from a variety of features anyways, so everyone wins, making their race how they want it. Now going into other features that I had to build from the ground up. The shape self feature that I decided was the 0-point feature allowed you to change into a blob, possibly appearing like a puddle or similar object. You have advantage on stealth checks, but you are also prone, so kind of zeroes itself out, right? But it kind of works like the shell retreat feature from the Beastborn. Corrosive was also a feature that was hard because there is no corrosive mechanic to weapons as far as I could see, nothing that made them detriment in that way, and I didn't want to make this one super complicated either, so a non-cumulative -1 penalty to weapons seemed pretty good to me, at least until the long rest. When you homebrew, you have to realize that a lot of it comes from the familiarity of the system and getting a good feel of what is strong and what is weak. And I do admit that my experience with DC20 is limited, as many are with it being a new and changing game. But as my experience grows, I may find that the balance needing to be adjusted in the future, or the dungeon coach himself can just comment below and let me know what I missed or what I can change. But one of my favorite features that I really wanted to put in is the split feature, where you can spend action points to split into two, just like many oozes. You can split your health points or hit points between the two of you, and can spend action points between the two of you as well, meaning you don't get 8 action points between them, 4 and 4, but you can just spend 2 on one and 2 on the other, for example. Versatile in a fight, but not overpowered on the action economy. And then another feature that I was actually surprised at how little it mattered in 5e, but then super broken when imported into DC20, holding your breath. In 5th edition, you can hold your breath for 1 hour as a plasmoid, but in DC20, holding your breath has a ton of ramifications. Casting verbal components for spells, getting the wind knocked out of you from martial characters, suffocation, and possibly noxious cloud effects in future iterations. Meaning that a creature that can hold their breath for even up to an hour disregards all of that. So instead of doing a bunch of workarounds and contingencies, I took a look at the breath duration mechanics and realized that there are basically 2 types of holding your breath: doing it during light or no activity, and then doing it during strenuous or dangerous activity. Easy enough, you can hold your breath for an hour during light or no activity. But then that seemed to swing more in the other direction for power, and it was more like a 0-point feature to me. So I looked at the swim feature of the OOZE-BORN giving a breath duration of 3, and I decided to give the hold breath feature the same thing. So basically the breath duration is how many turns or minutes, depending on what kind of holding your breath you're doing, that you can hold your breath for. But we'll see if we change that later, of course. But having all of these amazing features, we need more points in order to get them. That means negative point features. I easily took from small sized from OOZE-BORN and short legged from the halfling, giving a size option and a slow ooze feel seemed pretty appropriate, though I am still on the fence on if a trait that has the same mechanics has to keep the same name. Because having short legs is definitely not the fantasy, but 5e homebrews are a stickler for keeping the same name to a certain mechanic. And I also noticed that the halfling gave the trait a -2, and then the gnome trait of the same kind was the -1. And I'm sure that that will be fixed in the next version, but seeing the speed increase trait being a +2, it made sense that it was the opposite. As for other negative features, I included soft body, which decreases your physical defense, and then vulnerability to both sonic and fire damage. This had inspirational roots in the Marvel character Venom, which is canonically weak to sound and fire. Makes sense for an ooze-like character as well. I then noticed I needed one more single point feature to put in default traits. So I saw that some of the races had advantages against certain saves, and it would really make sense that an ooze-like creature would be really flexible and bouncy. So I gave it advantage against the prone condition. And now you may think that with so many features, how can you just choose 5 points worth? Well, currently you're allowed to add or subtract, as a DM, the number of points your players can spend on ancestry traits. You can keep it at the recommended 5, decrease it to only 3 for more restrictions, or bump it up to 7 for more oomph, and so on. But with that, I think that we have a full new homebrew race. I mixed things around a lot to make sure that I liked defaults versus the expanded, and might even change it more as I get feedback, but it will be available to all of you for free in the description below, and updated as needed. And if you like this video, give it a like and comment below if you would do anything different to the OOZE-BORN race of DC20. Interactions with this video lets me know if I should do more DC20 homebrew and topics in the future. And don't forget to back the Kickstarter before July 1st. You can see all my other free homebrew stuff either in my videos or by supporting me on Patreon. But in the meantime, go out there and make your worlds a better place. See ya.